There is a teaching in the Aghori tradition that is so simple, so easily overlooked, that most seekers dismiss it when they first hear it. It is the teaching of silence. In our age, where everything is noise, voices competing for attention, desires pulling in 1,000 directions, the constant hum of distraction, silence feels almost useless. People think of it as emptiness, as absence, as a lack of something. But to the Aghori, silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is the presence of truth. In the path of the Aghori, silence is not just practiced by closing the mouth. It is practiced by stilling the waves of the mind. The common seeker believes that knowledge comes from words, from scriptures, from teachings. The Aghori knows that words are only a shadow, a reflection of truth. The real transmission happens when the noise inside dies down. Silence becomes a bridge between the finite and the infinite. Why is silence considered the most powerful weapon? Because silence does not argue. Silence does not defend. Silence does not waste its energy in endless conflict. In silence, the energy is conserved, and that energy becomes Shakti, raw power, available to pierce through the illusions of the world. The one who has mastered silence cannot be defeated, because they have withdrawn from the battlefield where most humans waste their lives. The battlefield of constant chatter, constant justification, constant noise. There is an ancient Aghori story, rarely spoken outside of initiations. A disciple once asked his master, "Why do you remain quiet when people insult you? Why do you not correct them when they call you mad or evil or filthy?" The master smiled and simply looked at the burning funeral pyres on the riverbank. He said nothing. Days later, when the disciple pressed again, the master finally replied,
"When the corpse burns, it makes no noise, yet it is in silence that the body is transformed into ash and smoke. Would you call the fire powerless because it is silent?"
Silence is the fire of truth. It transforms without announcing itself. In the Aghori way, every sound is seen as vibration, and vibration is energy. The constant speaking, the constant need to explain, drains this energy. The one who cultivates silence gathers these vibrations inward, intensifying them, directing them. Just as a river becomes powerful when it is dammed and concentrated, so too does the human being become powerful when their words are restrained and their mind is stilled. Silence is also a weapon against fear. We live in a world terrified of silence. People turn on the television, play music, scroll endlessly, anything to avoid the encounter with themselves. But the Aghori deliberately walks into silence because silence reveals what we have hidden. It reveals the demons within. To sit in silence is to allow those suppressed voices to rise, and when they rise, when they are seen without judgment, they lose their power. The Aghori says, "Face your inner noise and it will dissolve into the silence of the self." Few know that silence is not just a spiritual tool but also a tantric one. In the Aghori practice of Shavasana, meditation on the corpse, silence is mandatory. Not just outward silence, but absolute inner stillness. For when the practitioner sits with death itself, the mind will want to scream. Fear will want to shout. The ego will want to argue with reality. But the silence of the Aghori holds the sadhaka steady. In that silence, the separation between life and death dissolves. The practitioner experiences that the soul is untouched by decay, untouched by fear, untouched by time. Only silence can take one so deep. Another secret: silence is the language of initiation. Many think the guru imparts wisdom through mantra, through discourse. But the highest initiation is given in silence. The master looks into the eyes of the disciple, and in that silence the transmission happens. The disciple cannot explain what they received, for it was not words, it was direct knowing. This is why the Aghori holds silence sacred. It is the purest medium for truth to flow. Silence is also the weapon that dissolves ego. The ego is hungry for recognition. It wants to be heard. It wants to prove itself right. But when you practice silence, not just with the mouth, but with the thoughts, you starve the ego. Slowly, it withers, and in its place arises something vast, something boundless. That boundlessness is the self, and it can only be realized in silence. The world believes that to conquer, one must fight. The Aghori knows that to conquer, one must become so silent that the illusion of duality itself fades. What enemy remains when you are silence itself? When you are not reacting, not defending, not caught in the noise of me versus you? Silence swallows the duality. That is why it is a weapon. It destroys illusions not by clashing with them, but by withdrawing the very fuel they need to exist. To the ordinary mind, silence may look like weakness, but it is the silence of the seed that holds the power of the forest. It is the silence of the night sky that holds the vastness of creation. It is the silence of the breath between inhalation and exhalation where life itself pauses. Silence is not nothingness. It is the womb of all things. This understanding is known to the Aghori, who sits by the cremation ground not to run from noise, but to hear the silence beneath it. Most people never taste this silence because they fear it. They confuse silence with loneliness. But silence is not loneliness. Silence is union. In silence, you are no longer separate from the river flowing, the fire burning, the wind moving. You are no longer a person thinking thoughts. You are the vast awareness in which all arises and dissolves. This realization cannot be taught in words. It can only be tasted in silence. There is another hidden insight. The Aghori understands that silence is not just the weapon of the sage, it is also the weapon of death. Death is the great silence. Every life ends not with noise, but with stillness. To embrace silence is to embrace death before it comes. To make peace with it, to realize that what we fear in death is not death itself, but the silence we have never known. The Aghori who has mastered silence dies before dying, and in doing so becomes free. When you cultivate silence, you notice how much of the world is built on unnecessary noise, arguments that go nowhere, opinions that change nothing, complaints that only deepen suffering. When you no longer participate in that noise, you reclaim your energy. This energy, purified by silence, becomes a weapon against ignorance. You don't fight ignorance by shouting against it. You destroy ignorance by embodying silence so deeply that it cannot survive in your presence. The deepest silence is not even the absence of words. It is the absence of the I. When the I disappears, there is only pure awareness, vast, luminous, eternal. This is the final silence, the silence the Aghori seeks. It is this silence that is the most powerful weapon because it slays the greatest illusion of all, the illusion of separateness. So the next time you sit quietly, do not think you are doing nothing. You are stepping into the same current that sages, yogis, and aghoras have stepped into for thousands of years. You are tasting the fire that transforms, the power that protects, the truth that frees. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is everything. If these insights resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to the Aghori Code. Together, we can create a community of seekers who dare to look beyond the surface, who value the silence between words, and who know that in this silence, we are never alone.